My name is Connie Boland. I am the founder and coordinator of Warbirds in Review, or I act like I am, but the person who really makes all the details come together is Kyle Guyat. She is absolutely wonderful, so I'll embarrass Kyle right off and say thank you. She's right back there. She makes everybody happy. Today's afternoon program is a change. You probably noticed this is not an L-19. This would be a P-51 Mustang, and a gorgeous one at that. So our friends from Midwest Aviation agreed to fill in for us for this program, and these programs would not be possible without the cooperation and the participation of our owners and restorers, but they really would not be possible without our sponsors. ScottsMiracle-Gro, Fagen Fighters. So to those guys and all the other people who support Warbirds in Review, I personally say thank you. And on behalf of Warbirds of America, say thank you. So let's get on to this beautiful airplane and Midwest Aviation. We have Mike Von Vadekor. I screwed that up anyway, didn't I? And Ryan Keene. That's a little easier to say. So these guys are here today to tell us about the acquisition and the restoration. And as you see, they took the cowling off, so you can see a little more about the airplane. Thank you. Thank you guys for being here. And we can have a chair if you like.
Awesome.
Let's move us back in the shade and take advantage of this really nice umbrella that we have now. Sorry we don't have an umbrella for you guys out there in the stands. Mike?
Go ahead.
Ryan? Thank you. Okay. So Mike, would you get us started? Tell us a little bit about your company, first of all.
Yeah, I started Midwest Aero Restorations in 1996. And I had worked for a private individual, Butch Schroeder. Back before that, I'd also worked at the University of Illinois as an A&P mechanic, and my draw was to the Warbirds, and ultimately Butch had some problems with one of his airplanes and turned that into a reserve grand champion here in 1990. After that, we picked up and started rebuilding his F6D camera photo recon Mustang, which was really rare at the time, still is rare. We restored that in 93 and won grand champion here. That was a really nice thing to do. And shortly after that, I had to make a decision, am I going to do this forever for Butch, or am I going to try to branch out on my own, and ultimately I decided obviously I needed to expand, and part of that was twofold. I mean, I had people started coming to me and asking me, hey, can you build this for me? And so we did an owner assist with a Stewart 51 back in 99, finished that, brought that up here, and shortly after that very same customer, he wanted the big full Mustang. We finished Cripes and Mighty for him in 2002 and won grand champion here with that. And it's just been a multitude of airplanes after that. We were real proud of the fact we had a Mustang here in 02, 04, 06, 08, 11, and then I think we had a T6 maybe in 13. But so we turned out a large number of airplanes during those years, and ultimately in 22 we finished the Messerschmitt 109, which was a long-term project for us, and brought that here, and that was very fun to show. It's the first time I think a Miami 109's ever been to EAA Oshkosh, and we hope to bring it back someday and actually be able to fly it. So it was just logistically, it was hard for us to fly it that year, being a new airplane, and it doesn't like extended taxis, and it tends to want to overheat pretty quickly. So we felt that just for safety, we just would not fly the airplane.
Well, that's safety first when we come to all this. We have an engine over here, and they on static, and it will be running throughout the week sometimes. And they say, well, we can only run it for a couple of minutes, and it's kind of like the real Spitfire. That's what that engine was in. It's like some of them do not like to not be in the air. exactly. So, and your cohort here, Ryan, you told me earlier you came through on out of Purdue and out of the Marine Corps. So tell us a little bit about how you got hooked up with Mike in Midwest.
Well, I served 5 years in the Marine Corps. I was a helicopter mechanic. I did Cobra and Hueys, both the older style, the November and the Whiskey, and then the newer Yankee and Zulu, which is a 4-bladed model. So I did those 4 different type model series, and I decided to get out of the military in 2012, and I ended up at Purdue studying aeronautical engineering technology. And I like that program because you could not only get your bachelor's degree, but you were able to also get your airframe and power plant license. So whatever path you decided, if you wanted to use your degree, great. But if you wanted to be hands-on, I was able to do that too. And, growing up, going to air shows and building models and stuff like that, I always loved warbirds and museums and stuff like that. So while I was at Purdue one year, I just kind of Googled, what restoration shops are nearby, and I found Mike's website, and out of the blue I emailed him just asking about if he was hiring or if he had any employment opportunities for a lonely broke college student over the summer or something. And he didn't have anything available that year, but I met him at Oshkosh, which was 2015. So I met him here for the first time. I met him and Dave, our shop manager. And shortly after that, I got a tour from him. So I saw the shop, and I met everyone else and saw what other projects they were working on. And kept in touch over the next year, and he hired me on over the next summer between my junior and senior year at Purdue. And I restored your Cessna 150 to start, which was a lot of fun. No, but it got my toes into the water, and I was able to help out on a few projects here and there in between the 150. And I liked the shop. I liked the people a lot that were there, and I loved the work. So after that summer ended, Mike offered me a full-time position when I graduated. So I got my airframe and power plant license. I got my degree, and I've been there for 9 years now.
Oh. All right,
yeah.
Very good. So how many people are in your shop now?
Well, I think I've got, what do we got? Maybe 4 full-time,
yeah.
And I've got a couple part-time guys. So
we have, where did Dave go?
Where's Dave?
Where's he hiding? Yeah,
there he
okay.
is.
So, Mr.
Dave's our shop manager.
Dave
Young.
Dave didn't want to be on camera. He's hiding way over here in the corner, so that's all right. We're going to drag him out here in just a little bit. When they took the cowling off of this airplane, we thought it'd be pretty cool. So if you could see what's under that nice, sleek cowling, there's a lot of horsepower under there and a lot of moving parts, and a restoration's pretty phenomenal. What you guys do. You mentioned Butch Schroeder. I have to go back and say I've known Butch since little Margaret was here, and Butch had hoped to have a P-40 here this year, and he said, but it's going to look like it did in World War II. It is not going to be shiny, and I've had World War II guys come up, and I'm sure you have too, who said, no, this does not look like it did when we flew them, because they were not very clean. They were real workhorses. So what you guys do is a really class act here. So tell me where the airplane came from. You hear the stories it found in a barn. I don't think this was one of those, but Butch's airplane, I think, was found in a barn.
Yeah, Little Margaret was certainly a barn find. This one had been restored, I believe, back in the late 70s, early 80s. It had been with a couple owners over the years. It had been superficially restored. Structurally, it had really never been touched other than a few minor incidents that have happened while it was flying. So structurally, we had a good, sound airplane to start the restoration with. I heard that it was for sale through a mutual friend of mine, David Martin, who actually did the original test flight on this airplane for us. So it was kind of neat that he was able to, he gave us the lead of the airplane being available, and then he got to do the test flying. So, we made a deal on the airplane. It was perfect for what the owner wanted to do. It was complete. It flew in at night, by the way. That was an interesting. I've never seen a Mustang flying at night, and he got delayed, and we were out there at about 7:30, 8 o'clock at night, and you could just hear the Mustang and the pattern, the gear coming out and landing. But yeah, just you done that?
So I've flown a Mustang at night, and I can tell you those little short stacks and the little pieces of carbon coming out and coming by you, and the flame being like right there. It's pretty cool.
That'd be
I
neat.
wouldn't necessarily recommend it. As a done it a few. It's really. As you say, you can definitely hear it, and then see the smokestacks, right?
So again, it was a good candidate for what the customer wanted. The customer, David Nock from the UK, we had built a T6 SNJ for him. I've completed that in 2011, I believe it was. Got Reserve Grand Champion here at Oshkosh with it. It was a all silver painted 353rd Fighter Group, same group, but it was a squadron hack. So it had the black and yellow checkerboard cowling. And he just had an affinity for the 353rd Fighter Group. Shortly after we got the airplane done, he'd always talk about wanting to have a Mustang. And so over a period of years, we just kept in communication, and finally he was ready to pull the trigger, and we started looking pretty hard, and then this one came available. And so we got it back to Danville and started on it. So it's been a good long project. I had the 109 and a couple other airplanes ahead of it, so sometimes that sets a customer behind a little bit. But we were able to disassemble it in the initial phase. We send the wing up to Odegaard Wings in North Dakota, where they put new main spars in it if the rear spars need it. Any other structural work that we maybe can't do or don't have time to do. But one thing that we do have them do is lock the wing into a position where it can come out of our fixture and not lose its shape. And thankfully, we're able to do that and maintain our color scheme. So we basically, in the wheel wells, in the restoration process, we would take all those parts, disassemble them, paint them individually like the factory did, paint them in the color that they were originally, and then rivet it all back together. And again, by putting the fuel tank stress doors on, and we don't really lose any of the structural shape of the airplanes. So that's good. But yeah, we started the project, and the wings were sent out, brought those back. In the meantime, Ryan and the guys in the shop are looking at all the parts that we've got on the shelves and disassembling everything to the smallest part we can, sending all the steel parts out for CAD plating, any necessary inspections that need to be done on any of the critical hardware, and the process starts there. And ultimately, we have a fuselage fixture, we've got a tail cone fixture, elevators, vertical stabilizer fixture, and then we do all the reskinning in-house. Something that's a little unique on this airplane is that this is a Dallas-built D model, and we've done several Mustangs over the years. I think most of them have all been Inglewood. It's North American built them in Dallas and Inglewood, California. This was a Dallas-built airplane, and we noticed the colors and some other minor differences, like the APU plug on the right-hand side, and were different than what we normally see. So with the owner's intention for authenticity, as we disassembled the airplane prior to sending it up to Odegaard Wings for the spar change, we documented all the parts and the colors of all those parts. The wheel wells were all repainted gray, probably in the 1980s. So our goal when we took that apart, and prior to stripping any paint, we'd take the two surfaces apart, and you could see on the backside what color they were. So we documented that. We've got a whole file of everything that we had taken pictures of. And so the goal was to paint those parts back exactly what they were and then reassemble it like the factory did. And that's why if you get a chance to look in the wheel wells, you see multiple colors, some greens, some various shades of yellows and greens, so it's been interesting. We've learned a lot over the years. So like one of the areas you'll see is all of the magnesium components in the airplane. They were required to have 2 coats of chromate. The reason for that is magnesium's highly corrosive. So one of their ways to ensure that while they were assembling the airplanes or building them, that they knew that the magnesium parts was they would use a tinted variation of the yellow chromate, and it was a dark green to a spec called ANA 611. So the gear castings in the airplane are the dark green. Any other magnesium castings today, sometimes we upgrade those magnesium castings to aluminum just for safety, but typically all the magnesium castings were all green. And then the ANA 611 interior green was used in the cockpit section. The engine mount was specified for the interior green color, and the rest could have been anything. Could be no paint, could be various shades of yellow chromate.
Well, and they didn't build them in the 1940s. They didn't think they were going to last for, however,
Correct.
80, 90 years or that they have. They were built for their mission.
Correct. And even like the early P-51D series, starting in around the Dash 5 model blocks, some of those had very little corrosion protection, if hardly any. But I think they were getting field reports. I'd seen a couple documents where in the field they had reported that they were actually having some corrosion issues in the field. So North American started amping up the amount of chromate they put on the airplanes through the production process. So I thought that was interesting.
And that brings me to the thought of, yes, you in the restoration shop, when you completely restore one, that's one thing. But how do the owners now keep them flying and get parts? There are people here, such as Roush, who has done a lot of development work on the airplanes. So where do the owners go to get the parts they need?
Yeah, so the owners are usually working through us. But so we find ourselves going either to individuals who we know might have parts, but used to be Pioneer, but Air Corps Aviation in Bemidji, Minnesota, they bought the Pioneer Aero inventory, so they've been really good to continue that and expand upon the offerings that Pioneer had for probably 40 years or more. So Air Corps' been real good. The engines, there's multiple engine overhaulers, like you mentioned, Jack with Roush Aviation. He's brought a lot to the table over the years with his the manufacturing and the processes to replace the consumable items, things like cams and valve seats and valve guides and pistons and piston rings, things like that. I don't think anybody's at this point, and not really in the future that I'm aware of, there's not necessarily a need for any of the big cast parts. I think there's enough cores. It's going to be all the consumable items, maybe rods, but I think cranks are still good. I don't think anybody's had to make any crankshafts, and I don't think anybody's necessarily need to make any heads. Although there was some in the UK, I believe, that had made a run of cast aluminum heads for the airplane, but I don't know if that ever turned out or panned out. But yeah, it was nice to. It is nice to have them step up to the plate, and FAA, PMA, a lot of those parts, and that just kind of ensures a lot of the quality control that we would expect in certainly in an engine.
Well, as the value of the airplanes go up and the safety issues, the value of the airplanes is such now that you really, you want to take care of them at any value, whether it's a really expensive airplane or a big one. But to have somebody who's willing to put in the time to manufacture the parts and have that available to the community, it's a close-knit group,
It is. I mean, we were just talking the other day. I mean, if you need something that, like for instance, a breakback plate insulator. How many do we need? Well, there may be 5 guys that need them, but do you make 5 or do you make 500? So it's a balancing act, and thankfully there's some people who maybe look aside at the cost and say, okay, we need it. Let's just figure out a way to make it happen.
Right.
So.
And Ryan, it sounds like you're the research guy, and you may be the one who helped find the authentic parts or whatever. So maybe you or Mike, or maybe even throw it over to Dave. Tell us about the drop tanks. Where did you get those, and what are they made of?
So they're made of carbon fiber by Roush Aviation. It was a couple of years ago when we did Happy Jacks.
2008.
2008.
That's a couple. That's a couple
That was
of
a couple
years
years
ago.
ago, yeah. So we had an original paper tank, and I think they sent it up there and they made a mold of it, and they used that as their master copy. And since then, they made a few sets, but these are fully functional, and they won't rot out like paper tanks did. In World War II, as soon as they put fuel in a paper tank, it was like, all right, the clock started, and they could only have fuel in there for so long before the paper tank disintegrated, and then that was the end of the tank. But these are completely reusable, and they're stenciled, they're authentic. This is what they look like during the war.
That's pretty cool. And you don't intend to drop them, and you don't. Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Thank God. No, hope we never
So,
drop them.
so how much fuel do they hold?
Those are 108 gallons.
108.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what's the range of a P-51 as yours is configured? I didn't tell you I was going to ask you this. So
Yes. Well, I mean, there's three. And most of the Mustangs out here have two 92-gallon tanks in each wing. That's the stock. That's the standard Mustang. World War II configuration had a fuselage gas tank with 85 gallons. Then there was different types of tanks. These were the paper tanks. Again, those were 108. The teardrop shape that you would see commonly during World War II were steel tanks. Those were 75-gallon tanks. And then there was several others through Korea. They had even larger tanks, and they had a tank so big that they actually had to put a limitation on the flap extension, so the flap wouldn't hit the drop tank when they extended it. So, but in most stock Mustangs are 2.5-hour airplane. I think you're looking at with just internal wing as a safe number. 2 hours is plenty of fuel or plenty of time in a Mustang. Our customer, who we built Happy Jacks Go Buggy for, he comes nonstop from San Antonio with. He puts an hour in each drop tank, so 60 to 70 gallons in each drop tank. He puts about 60 in the fuselage tank and then tops the mains off, and he comes cruising up to Danville nonstop and has plenty of fuel to spare. So it's a nice, that's what the Mustang was known for, obviously, being able to escort deep into Germany, protect the bombers, and it was a fuel-carrying machine for sure.
yeah, in the escorting, it made the P-51 made the difference in World War II when it could go deep into Germany, escort the bombers further. They went. Of course, they were at slow speed, staying with the bombers when they were there. So they were loafing and not burning the fuel that you burn and cruise now.
Right.
Bud Anderson, our good friend, Triple Ace, who just passed away this year. Bud would talk about the 8-hour mission that they flew deep into Germany. They didn't do it very often, and they were happy they did not do it that often. That's a long time in a Mustang.
Yes.
Well, in any airplane. Any airplane. So I'm looking at the prop here, and I think this group here, this session that we're doing here, we have a really great opportunity to focus truly on the airplane and the different features of some of the models. So tell us about the prop and the cuff blade prop you have on this airplane.
Yeah, there were two, and we'll say third type of propeller that North American built the P-51 with. Predominantly, they had this is called a cuff propeller, slightly rounded tips, has the cuff. I think it's been my understanding the thought process with the cuff was to help draw more air into the intake. The little scoop underneath there is the air intake that drives underneath the engine up through the carburetor and into the supercharger for air. There was another style prop. You'll see some out on the line over there called a paddle prop. It did not have cuffs. It had more of a square-looking tip, and that was very common. Kind of late, not so much World War II. You did see some in the South Pacific, but later airplanes and Korean airplanes carried a lot of the paddle props, we call them. And then, of course, there was the Aero Products propeller that was built on Dallas K model P-51s. And that was what was it? Aero products. I don't know if it was electric or if that had like a hydraulic unit.
Actually had oil
Yeah.
inside the prop. It was a hollow
Yeah,
prop,
yeah, right.
and that was the Korean era. Interesting to me. I think that is, if you hear P-51K, I believe the prop is the only difference
I think that's right.
in a D and a K. You go, okay, what is it? Well, it's the Aero Products prop.
Right.
If it came out of the factory, it was designated
Exactly.
as a K. A little lighter. It's very similar in looks to the paddle blade, I think.
And I don't know if there's many that I know of that are flying at all with it.
I
But the Hamilton standards, it's tried and true, and really a great propeller. So,
How about the inspections on the Hamilton Standard prop?
well, there's an AD that came out in 1981, and really that's the only AD really on the airplane. Is I believe a DC-3 years ago. Maybe it had been sitting in Miami, and I think it had been sitting for a long time. It had some corrosion that got internal to the propeller. I think it slung one of the blades. I think that prompted the AD, and I'm not saying that it was a fallacy type AD. It was, it was one that prompted all hydromatics to have this AD applied to it, and there are some guys do find corrosion during, so it's warranted for sure. But most of the time, they're opened up every 18 months, then it goes to 36 to 39 months, and I think it goes to a 60-month cycle if no corrosion's found. So most of our airplanes are on a 60-month cycle, and you just got to take it apart and then have it inspected, and they reseal it and put it back together. So,
well, and I'll throw in here that's the Warbird community. The networking and the working together that we're able to do, that prop AD is a good example of that, in that it was tried and true after a while. As you say, the extensions go on and on,
yes.
and they realize these airplanes are hangared. They're not in corrosion corner down in Miami or Fort Lauderdale. So
Right.
with the community working together, the FAA cooperated and extended that AD, which is, it was more damaging, I think, to take the prop off.
Exactly. Yeah,
than
you
it
got
was.
to count that.
Yeah, that was the danger. So, what else can you tell? You have the cowling off here. Is there something you'd like
could
to?
go walk
go
around, talk
wander
about it a
around.
little
I
bit.
think we can tell the people what they'd want to hear. If I were in the third grade and was a really curious kid.
So we
Which
do
I
give
am, by
I
the
do
way.
give tours at our airport, and
Great.
a lot of people are just always fascinated on how it works and what's underneath the skin. Certainly, like I mentioned before, this is the air intake. These grilled panels that you see is a filtered intake, so there's a filter in here, and from the cockpit, the pilot can select ground filtered air. You wouldn't take off in that, but if you're taxiing in a cloudy, dusty, or a dusty environment, they might shift it to ground filtered air only. So it wouldn't be direct, unobstructed, dirty air going up into the engine. It'd go through these filter panels first. So for takeoff, of course, you would select back to ram air, which is right down through, and that's a duct assembly that runs right down into through underneath here. And the carburetor, like I said, it's an updraft carburetor, kind of goes straight up into the supercharger and is distributed through the intake logs and the cylinders. It's a V12, of course. So that's basically the engine in a nutshell. It's also coolant. So it's a radiator. It's cooled like your car might be. The air scoop, which is so predominant in a P-51, as everybody notices, is really just the air that's going to go through and cool the coolant. The oil cooler is also in there. On the very bottom, there's a little oil door that cools the oil down. Oil temperature is typically not a problem with the Mustang. Coolant's a little more something that you certainly want to take good care of. But the oil cooling system is typically not as critical. There's an automatic position in the cockpit where the pilot can select auto, and the doors are thermostatically controlled, and it'll automatically open a door to the proper setting to maintain that. There's also the same system for the coolant radiator. Some of the safety items we might incorporate into the airplane would be, for primarily the cooling system, is a coolant door position indicator. So you can imagine if you're flying along and you're not really paying attention and you don't, you have it in automatic, and let's say you're developing a leak or it's getting a little bit hotter, you might not never notice it on the gauge, but your door is just continually opening and opening and opening to keep that temperature. Then it gets full open. Now the temperature starts rising. You're like, well, what's happening here? We put a mechanical indicator. Some guys will run electric indicators, and it'll just be a reminder. You can see where your coolant door is at all times. So guys, if they're running an automatic, they just quick glance down to make sure their door is in the appropriate position for the automatic operation. So the cooling system, again, that's certainly something you want to keep good close eye on in the P-51. These doors here, that we call those the clam doors. They're just a fairing door, so they actually close out the wheels after the gear retracts. You see them down now because there's no hydraulic pressure on the airplane. There's a T-handle we pull in the cockpit that releases the hydraulic pressure, and the clamshells open. When you start the engine, you engage the hydraulics, and once the engine pump starts, the clamshell doors shut, and the flaps come up, and then they taxi out and do what they need. So when you select gear up, the immediate call on the hydraulics is to lower the clamshell doors. The mains come up, and then the doors close. And so that's fairly simple hydraulic system. It's typically not problematic, and although Connie might have something to say about that, but they can be problematic.
Can be, yeah. Not very often, thankfully.
Yes. Drop tanks, like we mentioned earlier, these are 108-gallon drop tanks. The fuel pickups, there's a couple different positions in this airplane. Late airplane, they had 2 ports up in the very front. Everybody asks, well, what happens to the lines? When they jettison the tanks, the lines stay with the airplane, and there's a glass tube in the rear, and that glass tube shatters and the tanks go away. So that's pretty much how they operate. There's a selector in the cockpit for right drop tank, left drop tank, and it's powered. It's really just nothing more than on the back side of the vacuum pump, they pump a pressured air into the top of the tank. So head pressure just pushes on the top of the fuel, and it comes out the large feed back into the fuel selector and up into the engine. So it's pretty simple system, and it works pretty well, pretty effective. No electric boost pumps or anything like that involved. Pitot tube out here on the right wing, that's measuring airflow into the airplane for the airspeed. And gosh, what else can I talk about?
How about the guns?
Yeah, 650 caliber machine guns. You might notice this is just a blast tube, so this gun is staggered back, so they actually had to put an extension on the end of the barrel to get it through the wing. And so it's got 650 calibers. This has replica guns and 50 cal ammunition on board too, and we'll have that opened up when we show the airplane when we get to our spot. But yeah, the owner David wanted to have all the original components in there as much as possible. This airplane does have a back seat in it, but Roush, speaking of Roush, they were able to make a back seat kit. So what you see up there is the original, it's all carbon fiber, and it replicates the original position of the armor plate. The battery was originally in the back behind the pilot, as well as the radio unit, and all that sat on top of a fuselage gas tank. Obviously, if you want to take a passenger, you can't have any of that in there. So that assembly there, just a couple of pins, and we can pop it out, and then there's a seat back there for a passenger should anybody want to go for a ride. The cockpit, we've pretty much kept it as authentic as possible. We've got a comm and a transponder, but the layout, the N9 gun sight, all that's functional and pretty true to its original configuration.
And you, the mirror up on the cockpit on the canopy, was that original to the Mustang? They didn't all have that, is that correct?
They didn't. So the P-51, they all had a factory mirror, and that was on the inside of the D model canopy frame on the inside. So when the pilot rolled the canopy forward, he could look up. But a lot of the European pilots wanted better visibility from behind. So the 353rd Fighter Group and the pilot of this airplane, he had the Spitfire mirror. So that's actually a Spitfire mirror. Obviously, they were in the UK. There was an abundance of Spit mirrors. So few of our airplanes we've restored over the years have had Spitfire mirrors put on them. They're getting kind of hard to find, and that's an original that my customer in the UK, David, had picked up and sent it to us. So, and they had multiple configurations. Some the Happy Jacks, for instance, had a Spitfire mirror and it had a P-38 mirror bolted on top of the canopy. So he really wanted to see a lot behind him. But sometimes you'd see two Spitfire mirrors. Sometimes you'd see them out the side. It was really pilot preference and how the mechanic in the field, the crew, could make that happen.
Yeah, you have to wonder if the guys who flew the Spitfires in the UK, if they guarded their mirrors when any P-51 pilots came around.
Yeah.
They might be lifting them off
gotta
their
take
airplanes. Okay, the name on the airplane, the naming of it is one discussion we can have. How did you come up with that? But the other is the color and your research and how you found that color.
Well, being the 353rd Fighter Group, as a desired group that my customer David wanted to come up with, he had tossed around several airplanes within the group, but he kept being drawn back to the Dallas Dahl aircraft, and ultimately it was his decision, and he decided to go with this. Dallas Dahl was Frank Buldune's, the original pilot's girlfriend, and she was from Dallas, and he ended up not marrying her, but and I'm sorry I forget her name, but she was, I think it's in the article, but yeah, a gal from Dallas, and obviously very common for pilots to name their aircraft after their wife or girlfriend, and so that's what Dallas Dahl is. But all of our photographs, when we recreate an airplane from World War II, we really are relying on just photographs from that era. There were really very few photographs of this airplane, but there was one classic, iconic side profile shot of this aircraft, and everything that we had, it appeared as though it was just black and white, or black Dallas Dahl. So we started out and we put it in black. Then we got called on it and got thinking about it, and some gentlemen had pointed out that if you look closely and you take this black and white image and you lighten it, you can see a border. And that made total sense to us, primarily because a lot of the other airplanes that are in the group were also outlined, whether they were outlined in yellow or red, they were outlined, or black with red lettering. So, it was a judgment call, and the owner liked it. We decided to go ahead and try it. We actually painted Dave did the changeover. That was a little nerve-wracking. We had it perfectly painted on the side of the airplane, and now we have to modify it. So, but he did it by hand, did a great job. We took a black and white image of that and held it, looked at it from a distance, and black and white image, it looks black. So we're confident that it had a black outline and a red inside, and that's what we ultimately decided to do with it. And I think
I like it.
We don't have any counter evidence, and again, part of going back to how we try to piece these airplanes together. We may restore an airplane, and let's say we only have a picture of the nose. So what do we do with the rest of the airplane? Well, a lot of times we'll default to other airplanes in that group because that's our only other source. And it was very common for an airplane in one squadron within a group to all kind of look similar. Because a lot of times the nose art guys, whereas one guy maybe did all the nose art, or one guy did this lettering, and that goes the same with the mounting of the mirrors. You might have had one guy who did all that, and so they were all the same. So it's just kind of a little bit of a forensic investigation of photography from the day.
Oh, yeah, there was at one time some discussion, which I'm not sure that it wouldn't have been correct, is that the Glamorous Glen 3 was red also.
Okay.
But as you found in your photographs, all you have is the black and white. So do you know? Or so it's a judgment call.
Yeah.
Was it red or was it black? But I think there's a good possibility. And interesting, to know the guys who flew the airplanes in World War II. I don't remember what color it was, so they're no good.
Exactly.
I've asked Robin Olds a couple of questions at times. What about this airplane or that airplane? What did you do? I don't remember.
I don't remember
it's
exactly.
Like we were just kids out there flying airplanes.
Right.
So, Ryan, tell me, what was the highlight for you in the restoration of this airplane, if there was one? It's a long process. I guess.
Yes. The highlight, I would say, was after we had the checkerboard painted and nose art on, and we were able to get it outside for the first time and really look at it. The sheet metal work that my coworker Gary Day did, he was in charge of all of the structural skins on the fuselage. And if you look closely, you'll notice there's next to no tool marks on it. And we really went through great lengths to keep it that way. And it was very difficult. I mean, imagine drilling thousands and thousands of holes in a sheet metal and not getting a single scratch in it. And there was many, many days where he was very frustrated and upset. But at the end of the day, it's the most beautiful airplane because of it. And I think we all agree that it stands out from just about every other Mustang just because it's a natural aluminum finish, it's authentic, yellow and gold and clear rivets that are not like what you can just buy at Spruce today. It's all of those little details that it just makes it pop when you take pictures of it and look at it outside. So that was the highlight for me. It was seeing the finished product when it was finally done.
I'm sure, and the dedication, the attention to detail is obvious. It's phenomenal. So what was your highlight? I mean, when it rolled out and you said, "Phew."
Kind of the same thing. I mean, when we're sitting looking at this airplane under fluorescent lights all day long, you kind of go, ugh, you start getting a little nervous about what it's going to look like. But like Ryan mentioned, it was a very labor-intensive process. Anytime you countersink aluminum, it just carries all kinds of shavings around. And what that tends to do is wants to scratch up the aluminum. This being alclad aluminum, that means it's got a pure layer of aluminum on the exterior. And that's just a sacrificial piece of aluminum, or the layer of aluminum for corrosion. So it's really easy to scratch it. And we wanted to eliminate that. I mean, at the factory, maybe they didn't care. I'm sure they didn't care, but we didn't want to have all those little scratches. And so we went through lots of taping processes, countersink, pull the tape off, put a new piece of tape on, cut it out, put the rivet in, put tape over the rivet, shoot the rivet, pull the tape off. We spent a lot of time doing that, and that's the result you get. Close to factory look for sure. Probably maybe a little better, certainly better than factory. One of the other goals we had with this is if you look at production airplanes built coming right off the line, you'll see multiple shades of the aluminum, different colors, if you will, or shades. Shades is probably a better term. And that's really predominantly flat sheet that is right off the mill. You have different alloys for some of the fairings. They're soft, so they don't look the same. Some of the stretched formed and heat treated parts, they come out a little bit different color. So we tried to pattern that with our parts that we put on the airplane, so it had that patchwork look to it. Somebody asked me the other day about some of the white lines that you see. That's typically items that are spot welded or welded. So anything that welding is aluminum is difficult in its own right. So one of the processes, whether you're going to spot weld or gas weld, is to have that surface perfectly clean. And so one of the ways they did that was through an acid etching process. So those lighter colors that you see on the aluminum is just that process of the acid, which stains the aluminum and just keeps it looking a little bit different. So that's what you see on that. I think you'll see that on Air Corps P-47 and some of the airplanes they've done as well.
Yeah. Well, it's amazing. So going back to the paint scheme, maybe everybody here knows, but the invasion stripes that you see on the P-51s, they're, some are black and white, and some are just the black like you have. So that comes back probably to the same person painting or doing whatever in the middle of the night.
Could be. We found that after D-Day, they had orders to remove some of the invasion stripes. Some remained on. Some were taken off. This one has called theater bands over the wing, so they always had theater bands, and they were the black stripes that go around the wing and the horizontal tail, and across the vertical tail. But then it still this particular airplane, due to the paint scheme that we saw at the time, it had the black and white still underneath the star and bar that was left on for whatever reason. So,
Oh, I did. Okay.
Yeah. So, again, I'm not sure why. Some airplanes you'd see all that would be gone. They got rid of it, or maybe it didn't participate. That was another possibility. So.
Well, yeah. Okay, so I think would you like to have any other comments, or would you like to make Dave come up here and comment about the airplane, or have we missed anything that you guys would like to cover before we ask the audience if they have any questions? Yes, Dave, if we missed anything. And I think Ed is out here somewhere with a microphone, so there he is. Okay, you have anything to say, sir? Look at him all relaxed up there. He said, I'm not doing this session, you got it. So, okay. He's our moderator for our other shows, so he's up here to critique this one. Anybody? Okay, so let's go to questions here. If we can get a microphone to him, please, sir. Uh-oh.
Test one. There you go. Okay. How many P-51s are still flying in the world? We had a big P-51 fly-in Ohio here, 15 years ago? So how many are still going?
Connie, I'm gonna say, I usually tell people between 130 and 140.
I think that's probably a very, very close number.
Yeah.
The event in Columbus was certainly an amazing gathering, and that took the dedication of a lot of owners to get their airplanes there. But I don't recall how many that we had there. Do you?
Well, there was at least 51.
They were at least, because I was in the formation of 50.
51. Yeah, you were in that. Yeah.
I believe there was over 100 there, and they said there was like 130 in the world, and of course they were either in disrepair of some sort, but I'm just curious what it was today.
Yeah, I think we, thanks to the restoration people like this, we add a couple every year, and have had a pretty good safety record in the recent years, so I think we're still around the 130 mark.
Yeah, and I think there's quite a few in museums as well around the country. They'll never fly ever again, and right. Some still in states of disassembly and under restoration or in storage. So future looks good for that.
I have one quick question. We had a P-51 that was, supposed to be here tomorrow. And it was a incident, I guess. And it was a carburetor failure. Talk a little bit about that and how serious and what options you have if indeed you have a carburetor failure.
The engine quits, it's pretty serious. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah. Thankfully, he's not having to take it to a shop anywhere to fix any bent metal. He did a great job. I mean, when your carburetor goes away, you're done. I mean, you're just done. Thankfully, that's not a real common problem. But it does happen. I mean, these parts and these airplanes are, really got a lot of years on them now, and some of this stuff they're not making new either. So it happens. Again, it's a rare thing, but I think he did a great job getting it down safely, and that's the most important thing. He had options. Yeah,
he had been over he had just flown over Lake Michigan. It's close to Milwaukee, so had it quit over Lake Michigan, we'd be telling a different story. So somebody was looking after him, and the emergency was handled well by a wingman that he had, and the tower in Milwaukee said, clear to land any runway, anywhere, it's all yours. So the spirit of cooperation. You know, when you have a problem, everybody's there for you.
Exactly.
And Jim did a good job. He'll be back in this afternoon, I think, and ready to fly again tomorrow. Let's go back to, I mentioned to you guys earlier, you got a scholarship for A&P school. So I'd like to touch on how does a young person who's interested in these old airplanes not become a jet mechanic, but become a real airplane mechanic? Yeah, you caught that. Okay.
Well, jet airplane mechanics can become real airplane mechanics.
They can, yeah, they can.
Yeah, I mean, EAA for me has been everything. I mean, I'm not sure what I'd be doing without EAA. When I was a young child over here, high school or grade school, I remember I was telling you earlier, they used to have a fence out there between the Warbird grass and the ramp here, and you had to be either an A&P or an EA member to go out there and see the airplanes. But that's all changed now, of course, which is great. But I just remember at the time wanting to be a part of this, and I've had a lot of good mentors over the years, like I said, Butch Schroeder, and a lot of people that have reached out and mentored me along the way, and other shop owners have been very gracious over the years and helping me with questions I've had, and we've got a good network of guys that we work together very well, and even though we're competitors, we help each other out when we can, and that's done nothing but help them and certainly me. So reaching out and guiding young people into this is extremely important, and I think Young Eagles certainly helps that. We get young kids. There's certainly the Eagles program has been strong all across the United States, and I can just encourage you. We have tours at our hangar, and grade school kids come out, and it's hard to pull kids away from all the distractions they have in their lives today. But EAA has certainly been a big part of that and a draw for me, and that kind of helped launch me.
Well, and I think for all of us who are fortunate enough to work on these airplanes or fly these airplanes, we do not always realize the influence or the impact we may have on the young person who comes up and says, could I look at your airplane? Or if you happen to be able to put them in the airplane, that can affect their whole life. So I'm preaching to the choir here with all these dedicated airplane people, but it's about the young people and bringing them on. And you guys are going to be parked just right over here for the rest of the week, and I know you're going to be around and able to talk to people. So if you know a youngster who's interested in getting into aviation, they might come see these guys.
Yep, absolutely.
And there are scholarships out there. In fact, EA Warbirds of America, we're initiating a new scholarship fund that will be targeted toward an A&P mechanic. Okay. So I think that's a good step. Do we have any?
I'm sorry. To answer your question, now I forgot about what you had asked me originally. Yeah. In my local EA chapter, they all wrote letters on my behalf, unbeknownst to me, thankfully, for the EA Wagner Foundation scholarship. So in 1982, I got I think it was $400 or something for A&P.
That's a lot of money in that.
It was a lot of money, and I was glad to have it, and glad to be here.
Well, but it's that spark. It doesn't have to be a lot to help you out. Okay, we have just a few minutes left. We have another question. Mary, I think there's a gentleman there.
Hi, can you talk any bit about the ongoing maintenance both to the Merlin engine and the airframe to keep a plane like this flying, what the owner would have to do periodically?
Okay.
Well, that's a big question, but I mean, certainly it's no different than any other general aviation aircraft. We're required to do an annual inspection yearly. Depends on how many hours the owner flies the airplane. I'll say on average, most guys like to pull the engine top cam covers off and do a cam inspection and a head retorque. That there's some varying opinions on how often that needs to be done, but around every 30 hours or so. It would be a good number. And that's just an inspection. There's a lot going. It's an overhead cam, and it's got 4 valves per cylinder, and you got all the little camshaft or cam followers that ride on the camshaft. So we're always inspecting and make sure there's no metal transfer going on. Oil screen inspections, things like that. Just general maintenance. That would be the biggest thing for the engine. Airframe wise, it really depends. They're really a good airplane. They don't typically need a lot of maintenance, to be honest with you. Once, especially if they're rebuilt. If they're rebuilt, thankfully, after we get through a period where we have cut our teeth, so to speak, with the aircraft, they do pretty good. The more time you have on them, the more operations, of course. Then you can develop hydraulic leaks, but I say that, and you can develop a hydraulic leak after 2 hours, so it's hard to say. But certainly something that owners need to be mindful of during their inspections, and we talk about that in owners groups or maintenance groups. We're having one in a couple days here to just inform everybody what are we all finding, what's going on with your airplane, and what items do we all need to be looking out for, and that's what we've been doing for a number of years.
Right.
The Warbird community is a very cooperative group, and they do depend on each other a lot, and they're just really, really good people. Okay, so I want to thank you guys so much for being here. Yes, sir.
Connie, I have one thing. This morning I was remiss in not doing what I typically do, and it was in regard to the scholarships that you were talking about. There are other scholarships out there. They pay for your food, they pay for your housing, and we have a former Marine down there who, went through that. But I asked if there are active duty or veterans in the audience. We'd like to recognize you and say thank you for your service. So please rise if we have any active duty or reservists in the audience.
Retired veterans. Yes.
There you go.
Thank you. Thank you for your service. Thank you, sir. And again, these guys are going to be over here later in the week with the airplane open. And with that, thank you, Mike. Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Dave, hiding over there in the corner. Ladies and gentlemen, I know this was a short notice for this program, and thanks for sitting in the sun and joining us. We hope to see you again tomorrow.